we will ask one group at a time to come up to the podium and read your recommendations. And if possible, if you could leave your recommendations with us, then we will know what they are afterwards, and we don't have to make double copies of notes, if that's okay. We can always scan them back to you if you want them yourselves as well. So, who is going to volunteer to be the first group? Oh, this is the first group. Thank you very much.
I'm going to make it. How long? 5 minutes. Okay, good afternoon to you all again. We were discussing about domestic violence, and although we had a lot of controversial discussions on whether it's going to be a social problem or a political problem, but overall we agreed that it is both. It can be a political problem, and also it can be a social problem or a cultural or even religious problem. And we have come up with 2 strategies to manage on how to decrease these sort of domestic violences in the context of Afghanistan. So the 2 approaches we have come up were top-down approach and bottom-up approach. On the bottom-up approach, we agreed that it's very important at the very first to increase the literacy rate of women, and how that can be materialized is through conducting courses, conducting training programs, and these sort of things. And that could also allow people, particularly men and women, to get educated. And also we have agreed that it's not, the main target is not that we have to educate women on their rights, but we should also, as also we discussed it before, we should also equally increase the education level of women on what rights women and men both have, from both social and also from cultural and also religious point of view. We agreed that religious scholars or ulama can play a very critical role. We understood Afghanistan is a traditional country, and the role of religious mullahs, that we call it, or the religious leader or imam, they call it, can play very critical roles. So mosque is the best place to discuss the awareness, to discuss the importance and significance of women's rights from a religious point of view, so that the men should not feel that when they push women in a family level, so that the woman is well educated and say, okay, my husband, I respect you, stop it. This is not what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said, or this is not which has been reflected in any holy verses of Quran. So that is the second approach, or second important strategy to manage it. Also, we also agreed that on the social part of it, early marriage was a very big, or is a very big problem for strengthening or increasing the level of domestic violence in Afghanistan. So we again just agreed that mosque and religious mullahs can play a critical role here. So they also have to give those importance that early marriage is forbidden in Islam and it's not allowed at any rate. We also discussed that mutual respect, man and women or husband and wife have to respect each other, and those can be developed through these religious scholars as well as through community levels at local communities or whoever is the leading part. The other problem was about the sexual violence. Women should not be perceived as the sexual property of women. That mentality has to be diminished. That mentality has to go away. And here, media can play a critical role. Again, as I said, in traditional country like Afghanistan, so mullahs can play a critical role. So those have to be pushed out. And also, among our group, we agreed that family discrimination, giving distinction between men and women, by boys and girls, is something that also it creates the problems. For instance, if a family gets a boy and he's so pleased, but when he gets a daughter, he's not pleased, and I'm sure you know this in the context of Afghanistan. So that mentality has to be also diminished and eradicated, and mullahs, activists, human rights activists can play a critical role. So these were something that we could encourage from a bottom-up approach. And moving into the other strategy which we have agreed on was the top-down approach. And on the top-down approach, the first very critical, important issue is the legislation framework. If you live in a country where the legislation framework is not allowing women to actively participate in society, so it's nonsense, it's in vain, it's not going to do anything. So for that, the state has to play a critical role. And I'm so happy some of our colleagues say that some legislation have been passed which condemns any family violence or any domestic violence at family level. So we have also discussed that how the state can be encouraged or can be challenged. So one strategy to do that is media. Media can play a very important role for that, to create an incentive to bring up those legislation into effect. Or human rights activists, European campaign, Mr. Nassimi, all these can have their role and voices so that those legislation are developed or put into effect. We also discussed about the importance of education for women, for boys and for girls. Girls, like the boys, should feel that education is obligation and mandatory for them at all levels in Afghanistan. There is no barrier from Islam, there is no barrier from culture, there is no barrier from societies. It's only some people who would like to misuse it. So again, media, the religious scholars, and again, the state can play a critical role. Another important issue we have agreed on was the importance of aid. We are a country dependent for foreign aid since we got our independence in 1919. So let's say that it's nearly 100 years that Afghanistan has been a country called rentier, state rentier or rent-seeking country, a country which is not producing its own revenues. It's a rent-seeking country. So for this, what I mean, international organizations, aid agencies, donors, NGOs, each of them on their part can play a critical role on funding those sort of programs that can push or can develop active role of women in society. And I believe they have done pretty good jobs, and as you can see in the parliament, so many women can work, and as you can see in United Nations organizations and NGOs, women are all having good roles. And that was all. And political activists, my colleague said that there should be also political activists to give this awareness at community level. And she also said that political activists have to be supported and have to be protected by the government and by the state, because otherwise that is going to be also in vain. So those are all points that we have agreed on. I hope I'm right on the time.
Our topic was on self-help groups in the UK and in Afghanistan. And some of the themes that we as a group came up with was a central focus on education, on financial independence of women, offering women guidance and support, and addressing the lack of integration that women experience into mainstream British society. First of all, I'd like to focus on the financial aspects and the financial burden that some women living here in the UK experience, because obviously they do tend to have extended families in Afghanistan, and they do have that added pressure to provide for them. And as a group, one of the suggestions that we came up with was to provide them with financial independence in terms of providing support to help them start up their own businesses. There was an article recently in the Times which showed how Afghani women were going into the textiles business and how via this medium they were able to gain more respect and more independence from their family and provide financial support for their family. Another issue that needs to be addressed as well is the courses in English that we provide here in the UK to allow women to be integrated better into mainstream British society, and the difficulties that some women experience in this venture. With the Afghanistan Central and Asian Association, they do provide guidance and support for women and men alike in passing these English courses, but this needs to be implemented on a much more national scale if we are to yield more positive results. Another area that we had addressed as a group as well was the need for educating the men if women are to enter into British society and if they are to make a difference and an impact in their lives, men need to understand the abilities of women and not use religion as a tool to suppress them, and not to use religion as a means for their own personal, social or political ends. So in conclusion, in terms of improving the conditions of women and here in the UK, we can start on a much more smaller scale. We can use social media at home to allow women to access things such as education, and also then this will also allow them to then venture out into the outside community and hopefully yield more positive results. He will then go on to address issues in Afghanistan that women face.
I have 2 points.
Yeah, go.
I think it's, again, it's very challenging and very difficult that from where we start. We have a great deal of problem in Afghanistan. So how our women obtain their natural rights in Afghanistan, I think we propose 2 critical and important points. First, as our colleagues mentioned previously, that religion playing a significant role in Afghanistan, particularly Sheikh, Mullah, Afghan, Pir, and these figures or entities. Exactly. Yeah. So how we can project our idea, how we can conceptualize our idea. I mean, women. I'm a feminist as well, so I encourage women to how we can really sell our idea. So first, our proposal is that women should educate, should understand about religion. If you want to persuade your husband, you understand the contextualization which has been written, the text which has been written in Quran, as he said in Hadith, to bring a rational and logical debate or discourse to challenge your husband. Oh, you are wrong, man. It is not what is you are telling what is in Quran or Hadith or in any other historical context. So women should educate herself from a religious point of view, because women are subordinated by men. Men are saying, even in 19th or 18th century in Great Britain, that the clergy always dominated women. So, Jesus said that, Allah said that. Neither Jesus nor Allah said anything about what is going on. This is the clergy and mullah, what he is saying. First, women should understand religion. And second, all women in Afghanistan watching a lot of Indian movies and dramas. So, I think it is very important that we grab this opportunity and we project the idea. So, we have to utilize and use media. It is a milky cow, indeed. Media is a milky cow everywhere in the globe. So, how we can use that apparatus? Oh, sorry. And to educate our women is very important. I think this is the second, media. And also social media, Twitter, MySpace, NSP, Paltalk, Facebook, on and on, وغيره وغيره. So how we can reach? I mean, how we can teach our women to use? For example, my wife, Fahima, my wife, she has a small organization, that's we call domestic organization. She is teaching our sister in Afghanistan through Skype. So we teach them, wake up. Wake up. It is time for wake up. It's time for change. You have to take, we call in Farsi, yakhangir shawi. You have to take. You are right. As I said, freedom is not free. You have to move. You have to raise your voice, and you should not live in silence. If you are living in silence, you will live forever in silence. Men, by the nature, unfortunately, will never give you anything unless you demand you are right. That's another point. Media, religion media, and as well, it's, as she mentioned, a very precise point, a very critical and very important one. We educate the men to change their minds. You cannot change the world unless you change the mentality of man. So if mentality has been changed, but how you can approach it in a very, very rational way. You educate yourself, you say, oh my dear husband, you are great, you are nice, you are perfect, I love you, I miss you, something like this, to convince him. If you convince the man, you reach the point you wanted. Otherwise you say, oh, khak da sar gum sho.
Thank you, and just a reminder to the presenters to leave us your notes about your milky cows and everything, then we don't miss anything before the end, and Dr. Nassimi can take all your comments into account.